You are standing on the seawall of New Tyre, and for the first time in your life, you are not afraid of an army. You have every reason not to be. Your city sits on an island half a mile from shore, ringed by walls that rise 150 feet out of the water. Your navy is the best in the eastern Mediterranean. No force on earth has ever taken this place, and everyone behind these walls has grown up believing no force ever will. So when word comes that a Macedonian king is marching down the coast demanding your surrender, you do what your grandfathers did to every army before him. You close the gates. You wait. His name is Alexander. He is 24 years old. He has just shattered the army of the Persian king at Issus, and every city between here and Egypt has opened its gates rather than test him. Tyre does not open its gates. Tyre sends him an insult dressed as a compromise. Sacrifice to our God on the mainland if you like, but you will never set foot inside these walls. For a while, nothing happens. Then something strange starts at the shoreline. Macedonian soldiers begin dragging stone into the water, not warships, not siege engines. Stone, timber, broken columns pulled from the ruins of the old mainland city, dumped one load at a time into the sea as if enough rubble could somehow become a road. You watch this from the walls and you laugh because it is, on its face, ridiculous. The channel between the mainland and your island is open water. It has been open water since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. No one builds a road across the sea, but here is the detail worth holding on to, because you will need it later. That road Alexander is building out of scavenged rubble, and stubbornness is not going to wash away with the tide, and it is not going to be torn down when the fighting ends. It is going to still be there in 2,000 years. It is going to outlast the war, outlast the empire that wins it, and outlast the very idea of Tyre as an island at all. We will come back to that. For now, all you know is that a young king with no fleet capable of beating yours has decided that if the sea will not let him in, he will simply stop letting it be the sea. To understand why Alexander refuses to walk away from this island, you have to understand where he is standing in the fall of 332 BCE. 3 months earlier, at a place called Issus, he had crushed the army of Darius III. King of the largest empire on the planet, Darius fled. His mother, wife, and children were captured. By any normal measure, Alexander had already won the war. But Alexander is not fighting for a single victory. He is fighting to strip Persia of every port on the Mediterranean, because as long as the Persian navy has coastline to operate from, it can sail behind him, cut his supply lines, and threaten Greece itself while he is chasing Darius deeper into Asia. So he marches south along the Phoenician coast, and city after city does the smart thing. Byblos opens its gates, Sidon opens its gates, and then he reaches Tyre, the richest, strongest, most defended Phoenician city of them all. And Tyre does something none of the others dared to do. They tell him no, not outright, not at first. Tyrian envoys meet him on the road and offer flattering words, promises to honor whatever he wishes. Alexander tests them with a single request. Let me enter the city to sacrifice to Heracles at your temple. It sounds almost religious, almost harmless. It is not. Heracles to the Tyrians is Melkart, the god whose temple sits inside New Tyre's walls. And letting a foreign king's army inside those walls, even for a sacrifice, means giving up the one thing that has kept them safe for centuries. Access. The Tyrians offer a workaround, sacrifice at the temple in Old Tyre instead. They say, the abandoned mainland settlement, no army required. It is a polite way of saying the same word twice. No. Alexander sends a second delegation. This time, the Tyrians do not bother with diplomacy. His representatives are killed inside the city and thrown from the walls into the sea below, in full view of the Macedonian camp. There is no ambiguity left after that. This is not a negotiation that failed. It is a declaration of war, and everyone on both sides knows it. Alexander begins in January of 332 BCE with the only tool available to a king who cannot yet challenge Tyre's navy. He blockades the harbors and occupies Old Tyre, the empty mainland city the Tyrians had abandoned generations earlier when they moved their whole civilization onto the island for safety. Every stone still standing in that old city, broken columns, collapsed walls, timber pulled from empty houses, becomes raw material for what comes next. Engineers call what he builds a mole. In plain language, it is an artificial road laid across open water, built by dumping enough solid material into the sea that eventually ships cannot pass over it, and men can walk across it instead. Near the shoreline, the plan looks almost easy. The water here is shallow, the seabed soft and muddy, and the first stretch of causeway climbs out of the coastline faster than anyone expected. Dozens of meters a day, stone and rubble packed down under the boots of thousands of Macedonian soldiers who have never done construction work like this in their lives. For a few weeks, it even feels like something impossible is becoming ordinary. The gap between the mainland and the island is closing, foot by foot, and from inside Tyre's walls, the defenders can watch it happen in real time. They do not intend to watch quietly for long. Pause here for a second, because it is worth naming exactly what you are watching. This is not a normal siege. There is no army charging a gate, no ladder thrown against a wall. This is a 24-year-old king who cannot beat an island with ships, so he has decided to make the island stop being an island. Stone by stone, day by day, he is rewriting the geography of the Eastern Mediterranean just to win one argument. If a story like that is the kind of thing that keeps you watching until the very last minute, go ahead and subscribe now, because what happens next is where this plan almost falls apart completely. The trouble starts where the seafloor drops away. For the first stretch of causeway, the water had been shallow and forgiving, a few feet of soft mud that swallowed rubble and let the road climb fast. But the closer the Macedonians get to Tyre's walls, the deeper the channel becomes, until the seabed falls away to nearly 18 feet. Every load of stone that used to build a few meters of road now barely holds its place against the current. Progress that once moved by the day now crawls by the week. And the Tyrians are no longer just watching. From the walls, archers and catapults begin raining fire on the work gangs below. Men who are not soldiers in that moment, just laborers hauling rock with nowhere to take cover. Tyrian galleys slip out from the harbor to harass the flanks of the causeway, forcing Macedonian crews to fight and build at the same time. At night, divers slip into the water near the causeway's edge, quietly sawing through the anchor ropes holding Alexander's siege equipment in place, letting the current drag it loose. Alexander answers each trick with a smaller one of his own. Ropes get cut, so he replaces them with iron chains that no blade can saw through. Stone blocks hidden under the water keep his battering rams from reaching the base of the wall, so he brings in crane ships to haul the blocks up and clear a path. Every Tyrian countermeasure buys the defenders a few more days. Every Macedonian countermeasure buys a few more feet of causeway. It is a slow, grinding trade, and for a while neither side is losing. Then the Tyrians notice something useful. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Alexander pulls back from the front to eat and rest with a large part of his fleet. It is a small human routine, the kind of thing you would only notice if you had been studying your enemy's habits for weeks. So they plan their next strike for exactly that hour, certain his ships will be idle and his attention elsewhere. On the day they choose to attack, Alexander happens to have skipped his rest. It is a small detail. It should not matter this much, but it is the difference between a surprise attack that catches an enemy scattered and one that catches him ready. And the Tyrian sortie, timed to perfection against a routine that no longer holds, is beaten back before it can do real damage. Here is the part that almost ends the whole campaign. The Tyrians take an old horse transport ship, a heavy, slow vessel meant for cargo, not war, and turn it into a weapon. They pack it with dry branches, pitch, sulfur, and anything else that will burn hot and fast, hang cauldrons of flammable oil from its masts, and load it low in the water so it rides deep and steady. 2 triremes tow it out under cover, aimed directly at the 2 massive siege towers Alexander has built at the causeway's edge. Towers wrapped in rawhide to survive fire arrows, towers he has spent weeks constructing as the anchor point of his entire assault. The fireship strikes the causeway, and the crews set it alight. The rawhide that was supposed to protect the towers only feeds the flames longer. Fire climbs both structures at once, and behind the burning ship, Tyrian soldiers row out and leap onto the causeway itself, smashing whatever siege equipment the fire hasn't already claimed. By the time the flames die down, both towers are gone. Weeks of work reduced to blackened timber floating in the channel. You can imagine the silence in the Macedonian camp that night. Every soldier who dragged stone into that water, every engineer who calculated the angle of every wall, all of it undone in an afternoon by a ship no one thought to defend against. This is where a smaller king gives up. Alexander does not give up. What he does instead is admit something that pride usually makes kings slow to admit. He cannot win this with engineering alone. He needs a navy, not to match Tyre's fleet, but to outnumber it so completely that Tyrian ships never leave the harbor to threaten his causeway again. So he sends word along the coast, and the answer comes back faster than anyone in Tyre expects. Cyprus sends ships, the Phoenician cities that already surrendered, Sidon, Byblos, Aradus, send ships of their own, unwilling to bet against the man who just crushed the Persian army at Issus. Almost overnight, Alexander goes from a king with no fleet to a king commanding one of the largest naval forces in the eastern Mediterranean. With that fleet, he does something the Tyrians never planned for. He blockades both of their harbors at once, sealing their navy inside the very walls it was supposed to be defending from. The ships that spent months harassing his causeway now sit trapped, unable to leave without sailing straight into a force that outnumbers them. Behind that wall of ships, the engineers go back to work, wider this time, better protected, rebuilt with the lessons of the fireship burned into every decision. New siege towers rise. Battering rams, mounted now on slower transport ships and horse carriers refitted for war, get anchored near the base of the wall with iron chains the Tyrian divers cannot cut. When submerged blocks of stone keep the rams from reaching solid wall, crane ships haul the blocks away, one by one, clearing a path that took the Tyrians generations to build into their defenses without even knowing it. For days, Alexander tests the wall the way a man tests ice before he steps onto a frozen lake. A strike here, a strike there, watching for the one point that gives before the rest. Near the southern end of the island it does. A section of wall, weakened by weeks of bombardment, finally cracks open. Alexander does not wait for the breach to widen on its own. He throws everything at that single point at once. Troops crossing the causeway on foot. Ships closing in from every side of the island, catapults clearing the walls of defenders while soldiers pour through the gap in the stone. The fighting inside the city afterward is brutal and fast. Whatever discipline existed on either side by that point has burned away with the two towers the Tyrians destroyed months earlier. Arrian records that roughly 8,000 people inside the city are killed in the aftermath. Those who reach the Temple of Melkart in time, including the Tyrian king, Azamilcus and many of the city's nobles, are spared under the old rule of sanctuary. 30,000 more, mostly women and children, are sold into slavery. Tyre, which had never fallen to any army in its long history, falls in a single day after 7 months of siege. Here is where we come back to the detail we planted at the very beginning. That causeway, the pile of scavenged stone and stubbornness that Tyrians once laughed at from their walls, does not disappear when the fighting ends. It stays. Over centuries, sediment and sand gather against it, the way debris gathers against any obstacle placed in moving water, until what was once open channel slowly fills in on its own. The island Tyre spent its entire existence depending on for safety stops being an island at all. Today, more than 2,000 years later, the modern city of Tyre in Lebanon sits on a peninsula, permanently fused to the mainland by a road one furious king built in a few months out of rubble and refusal to lose. Alexander did not just capture a city. He redrew the coastline of the eastern Mediterranean, and the map has never gone back. It is worth setting this next to something more familiar. Modern nations still do versions of the same thing, dumping sand and stone into shallow water to build artificial islands, new ports, entire new pieces of coastline where there used to be only sea. Most of the time it is called engineering, or ambition, or progress. Tyre is a reminder that the very first time anyone did it at this scale, on purpose, it was called a siege. So what do you actually take away from a story like this? First, the plain truth of it. Alexander did not beat Tyre with a bigger army or a better navy. He beat it by refusing to accept that the sea counted as a wall. Every other option, negotiation, blockade, patience, had already failed before the first stone went into the water. The causeway was not the clever plan. It was the only plan left. Second, and this is the part worth sitting with a little longer. Almost everything you have ever been told is impossible, is really just a problem nobody has been stubborn enough to solve. Tyre did not fall because it was weak. It fell because one man was willing to spend 7 months, thousands of lives, and an entire coastline's worth of stone, proving that impossible was just a word the Tyrians hadn't tested hard enough. And third, the one that stays with you after the rest fades. Alexander did not just win a war here. He left a permanent mark on the physical world, one that outlasted his empire, outlasted every king who came after him, and is still visible from space today as a strip of land connecting Tyre to the Lebanese coast. Most conquerors are remembered through statues and stories that erode with time. Alexander is remembered in this one case through the actual shape of a coastline that a furious king refused to lose to. So here's the question worth leaving in the comments. Was this the greatest engineering achievement of ancient siege warfare? Or one of history's clearest examples of what unchecked obsession looks like when it wins? Tell me which one you believe and why, because in the end, this is not a story about a wall. This is not a story about a fleet. This is a story about how far one person will go to make the world agree with him, and what the world looks like centuries later once he does.